The story begins with the narrator introducing their co-worker, a 36-year-old woman who is both entertaining and frustrating. She has a habit of oversharing and lacks self-awareness, yet she has managed to become somewhat close to the narrator. Over time, she has confided in them about various aspects of her personal life, including a troubling revelation. She is involved in an affair with a married man. This man, also 36, is someone she has known for a long time. Their history dates back to their teenage years, and they even dated during their college years. However, their relationship did not last due to her infidelity. She cheated on him, and things between them were never the same again. Despite this, he apparently never got over her. Even after getting married, he continued to pursue her, unable to let go of his feelings. One detail that makes the situation even more complicated is the identity of the man's wife. She is not just any woman. She is a former nemesis of the co-worker from their school days. This connection seems to fuel the co-worker's interest in the affair. Rather than feeling guilt or hesitation, she appears to enjoy the idea that she is sleeping with the husband of someone she has disliked for years. There's a sense of rivalry at play, making the affair feel like more than just a romantic or physical connection. To her, it may be a form of revenge or proof that she still has power over the man, even after all these years. The narrator, while shocked by the entire situation, finds themselves unable to look away. Every new update from the co-worker about the affair is like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. Despite their moral reservations, they can't help but be intrigued by the sheer recklessness and audacity of what is happening. They begin to question the psychology behind such actions. Why would a man remain so obsessed with someone who betrayed him in the past? What does it say about him that he is willing to risk his marriage and family for a woman who seemingly does not care about him in the same way? At this stage, the narrator also begins to see how their co-worker rationalizes her actions. She does not express remorse or concern for the man's wife or children. Instead, she focuses on the thrill of the affair, the excitement of being pursued, and the satisfaction of knowing that she still has a hold over this man. It is clear that she is not thinking about the consequences, either for herself or for anyone else involved. The more the narrator learns, the more disturbed they become. Infidelity is not uncommon, but the emotional layers of this particular affair make it even more unsettling. This is not just a case of a married man seeking an affair due to dissatisfaction at home. It is a years-long obsession that has finally resulted in betrayal. The fact that the co-worker seems to revel in it rather than feel any shame makes it even worse. This part of the story sets the stage for what is to come. The co-worker's lack of awareness, the married man's inability to let go of the past, and the underlying rivalry between the co-worker and the wife all contribute to a toxic situation. The narrator, while positioned as an outsider, is drawn deeper into the drama, unable to ignore the chaos unfolding right in front of them. As the affair progresses, things take an even more shocking turn, leading the narrator to question not only the choices of those involved, but also their own perceptions of love, loyalty, and morality. As the affair continued, the co-worker provided more shocking updates to the narrator, each more audacious than the last. At first, the affair seemed to be unfolding in a way that, while immoral, followed a typical pattern: secret meetings, hidden messages, and careful discretion to avoid detection. However, the married man soon proposed something so reckless that even the co-worker, who had shown little concern for consequences, hesitated. He wanted to bring her to his own marital home. The idea was so outrageous that the narrator initially thought their co-worker was joking. But as she continued explaining, it became clear that he was completely serious. His wife and children would be out for the day, and he saw this as the perfect opportunity for them to spend time together in private. To him, it was a matter of convenience. To the narrator, it was a shocking level of carelessness and disrespect, not just toward his wife, but also toward the co-worker herself. The narrator couldn't wrap their head around it. Affairs, by nature, are meant to be kept as far from home as possible. The risk of being caught is always present, but bringing a mistress into the home he shares with his wife and children, That felt like an entirely new level of betrayal. It was one thing to be unfaithful, but to violate the very space where his family lived, that was an act of complete disregard for their existence. Concerned, the narrator told their coworker that this plan sounded incredibly dangerous. There were so many things that could go wrong. What if the wife returned home unexpectedly? What if a neighbor saw them? What if something was being recorded on a security camera? The entire setup seemed like a disaster waiting to happen. A part of the narrator even wondered if it was a trap. Could the wife already suspect something and be setting him up to catch him in the act? Or was the married man testing the coworker to see just how far she would go for him? The coworker, however, dismissed these concerns. She seemed to believe that the married man was in full control of the situation and that there was no real risk. But why was he willing to take such a massive gamble? The narrator began analyzing his motives, trying to make sense of such reckless behavior. Was he simply arrogant enough to think he would never get caught? Was he so obsessed with the coworker that he had lost all sense of caution? Or had he reached a point in his marriage where he no longer cared about getting caught? The more the narrator thought about it, the more unsettling the situation became. Despite everything, the coworker was actually considering going through with it. This was the moment when the narrator felt a shift in their perception of her. Up until now, they had seen her as someone who lacked self-awareness and made poor choices, but this felt like something even darker. How could she not see the depth of the betrayal she was participating in? Did she truly not care, or was she so caught up in the excitement that she was willing to ignore all logic? For the first time, the narrator openly judged her. While they had tried to stay somewhat neutral before, they couldn't hold back their disapproval this time. They told her bluntly that if she went through with this, it would be even lower than what she had already done. But to their frustration, she didn't seem to take their warning seriously. This reckless proposition left the narrator more unsettled than ever. Not only was the married man showing an extreme disregard for his wife and children, but their coworker was willing to go along with it. What would happen next? Would she actually agree to this? And if so, what were the chances of it all going horribly wrong? As the narrator processed the shocking request from their coworker's married lover, they found themselves spiraling into a deep sense of disillusionment. Up until this point, they had always known that infidelity was a reality in many relationships, but this situation made them question everything they believed about love, trust, and marriage. They had always assumed that married people, especially those with children, would at least try to keep their affairs as discreet as possible. The idea that a husband would bring his mistress into the home he shared with his wife and kids felt like the ultimate level of betrayal. It was no longer just about a physical affair. It was about a complete lack of respect, boundaries, and responsibility. This realization led the narrator down a rabbit hole of researching infidelity. They found themselves reading endless stories online, on Quora, Reddit, and other forums, where people detailed their experiences with cheating spouses. They saw patterns emerging. Many people in long-term marriages became reckless, as if they wanted to get caught. Others carried on double lives, expertly hiding their deception. Some, like this married man, seemed to lose all sense of caution, crossing lines that felt almost sociopathic. The more they read, the more disturbed they became. Was this how love worked? Did all relationships eventually lead to deception, betrayal, and heartbreak? Could people ever truly be loyal, or was infidelity just a matter of time and opportunity? These thoughts weighed heavily on them, especially since they had experienced betrayal in the past. At the same time, they struggled with their growing frustration toward their coworker. While they had once viewed her as a clueless, somewhat immature woman, they were now starting to see her actions in a different light. It wasn't just about making a bad choice. She was actively engaging in something cruel and destructive, and she knew it. She wasn't being manipulated or deceived. She was fully aware of the pain she was helping to cause, and yet she continued without hesitation. Worse, she didn't seem to care about the bigger picture. She was so focused on the thrill of the affair and her personal vendetta against the married man's wife that she wasn't even considering what would happen if they got caught. Would she feel any guilt if the wife found out? If the children's lives were turned upside down? If the man's marriage fell apart, the narrator wanted to shake her to make her see the damage she was causing. But at the same time, they knew it wasn't their place. People made their own choices, no matter how reckless or hurtful. And, truthfully, they weren't even sure if she was capable of feeling guilt at all. As her co-worker continued updating them about the affair, the narrator found it harder and harder to hide their disgust. The more she talked about her excitement and how much she enjoyed the attention, the more the narrator realized they couldn't see her the same way anymore. There was something unsettling about the way she laughed off the severity of the situation, as if it were just some casual fling instead of slow-moving disaster. The narrator's growing moral conflict reached a breaking point. They had once been a voice of reason for their co-worker, but now they weren't sure they wanted to be involved at all. Every conversation left them feeling drained and frustrated. They had lost respect for the married man, for their co-worker, and even, in a way, for themselves, for allowing this toxic drama to pull them in so deeply. The big question remained, would she go through with meeting him at his home? And if she did, how long before everything came crashing down? As the affair continued to spiral into deeper levels of recklessness, the narrator found themselves growing more detached from their co-worker. The more she shared, the harder it became to listen. At first, the narrator had been intrigued by the sheer audacity of the situation, but now they felt only disgust. They no longer saw their co-worker as someone making foolish choices. They saw her as someone who lacked empathy and self-respect. Then came the breaking point. One day, the co-worker came in with an update that was even more outrageous than before. She casually mentioned that she had finally agreed to meet the married man in his home. She recounted the experience with an almost giddy excitement, as if it were some sort of romantic milestone rather than a massive act of betrayal. She described how thrilling it had felt to be in the wife's space, how she had even taken note of little details, family pictures on the walls, the scent of the wife's perfume still lingering in the bedroom. The narrator could barely contain their reaction. This was beyond infidelity. This was cruelty. It was one thing to cheat in secrecy, but to willingly enter the home of a woman she had hated since high school and disrespect her marriage in such an intimate way, it showed a level of pettiness and selfishness that the narrator could no longer ignore. They finally snapped. They told their co-worker, in no uncertain terms, that what she was doing was vile. They pointed out that she wasn't just hurting the wife. She was hurting the children, too. They reminded her that this affair wouldn't end well, and when it did, she would have no one to blame but herself. For the first time, their co-worker actually seemed taken aback. She had always expected the narrator to listen, even if they didn't approve. But now, faced with their open judgment, she became defensive. She tried to justify her actions, insisting that the married man had been chasing her for years and that if he really loved his wife, he wouldn't be cheating in the first place. But the narrator had heard enough. They walked away from the conversation, finally deciding to distance themselves from the toxic mess unfolding before them. In the days that followed, the co-worker grew quieter around them. She no longer shared details of the affair so openly, sensing that the narrator was no longer an eager audience. The narrator, for their part, felt relieved. They had spent too much time obsessing over something that had nothing to do with them, something they could never control. Still, they couldn't shake their disillusionment. This entire experience had changed the way they saw relationships and marriage. They had always known infidelity existed, but seeing it unfold so up close, watching someone gleefully destroy a family, had been a harsh reminder of how selfish people could be. The affair, they knew, wouldn't last. The married man was playing a dangerous game, and eventually, the truth would come out. When it did, it wouldn't just be his wife who suffered. His children would suffer too. And their co-worker? She would eventually realize that she had never been anything more than an escape for him, someone he used to relive the past. In the end, the narrator walked away from the situation with one clear lesson. Some people don't care about consequences until it's too late. And no matter how much you warn them, they won't listen, because deep down, they don't want to.